So we can start with the discussion on the theme of the legacy of Council of Nicaea and the Creed of Nicaea. First, because we have all of us have been here before, but we have a new member of this panel. It's Dr. Veronika Matějková from the Faculty of Practical Theology of the Hussite Theological Faculty in Prague. Is it correct? Yeah. So, Veronika, please, can you shortly introduce especially your workshop theme that you will have in the afternoon, and yourself?
Hello, thank you very much. At the beginning, I must say for an invitation, because now I am in such a great company here in this panel, and I feel that I'm here today more for the workshop. So please, if you are interested in the discussion about the synodality and maybe even the other discussions in Czechoslovak Hussite Church now and in the 100 years history, you can join the afternoon workshop. And I haven't been here yesterday, which I'm sorry for because I traveled back from one research stay, but it's my pleasure to be here today with you, and I hope if you will be interested in something from Hussite Church, you have two choices to ask in this panel, so which couldn't be bad, I hope.
Thank you. And I was thinking about what questions, what themes to open this panel discussion. You've all heard that most of the program or most of the lectures were dealing with history, obviously because we are dealing with 1,700 years old council, but it is not only history that's important for us, and maybe I would like to orientate this discussion more on the actual and present situation than on the historical context and historical situation of the Council of Nicaea. But I would start, if you could all sum up, because we were talking a lot about legacy of the Council, and there are positive things. There are also quite a lot of things that we cannot say are entirely positive. So if you would sum it up, what's the legacy of the Council of Nicaea for you, for your tradition, for your church, but mostly for you as a Christian person, Christian believer? Or maybe broadly, what's the legacy of this whole old church theology and tradition that we are carrying on with ourselves in our churches, in our theological departments? So please, I will start with Jennifer as the nearest one to me.
Yes, thank you very much for this question. Personally, for me, the Nicene Creed is the most important of the council concerning the legacy of this council, and connected with this Nicene Creed, the question of Trinitarian theology today. What does it mean to us to confess Trinitarian God, confess in a very secularized context? So that would be one, and for me the most important, and I think also for my church the most important, the Nicene Creed. But at the same time, in an ecumenical perspective, the most important question, which I take from dealing with the Council of Nicaea, is the question of the Easter date. Because this is kind of, for me, a really disturbing issue that we do not celebrate Easter together, but very often weeks away. So I think it is really an ecumenical ecumenical task for us to find a common Easter date.
Yeah, if I may follow, I think in 2025 we will have the same date for the celebration. So it's a special year for this. But if I may reflect on Nicejský koncil and what does it mean for me and my church perspective, I would say what we heard this morning, that it's not black and white. It's always about in my eyes to see the context and consequences, and not just to see the results, but even the way how we get to this result is important. So, for example, as Ivana mentioned in her lecture, that it's important to see the core, what we can express, but to know that what we are expressing is not all, that there is still something we can't say. So this is what I take for the present time. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I like Robin Williams' notion of the placeholder of meaning, and for me the Nicene Creed would be precisely that. I think having the experience in the church where I practiced and where I studied in the seminary first, that the older Christian tradition was either misunderstood or disregarded by the generation of our teachers. I came to appreciate its importance a lot, and after having really some today unbelievable conflicts when the bishops shout at you, why do you teach about church fathers and not Karel Farský, which would be the generation of the founders of the Hussite Church. I'm really grateful that this has passed away, and so that the older tradition nourished a number of people in the church as well. So I think the Nicene Creed for me would not be isolated from its history. You can't do that, because another danger in the churches interfaces, like what I said about the Hussite Church, is that people embrace new forms of fundamentalism. And we had that in the past as well. I still remember when I think it was the Portugal Apostolic Succession, which was offered to a group of Hussite clergy, when the bishop who ordained them even didn't ask anything about them. There was no preparation, no pastoral care, just they were promised that now here they will have the instant presence of what they were always missing in their life. And I think that there is a danger to treat creed like that as well. And the ancient tradition for me is not that. So, well, I think, and I would go also with Angela when she said that normativity is important for her. It is really important for me as well. But I think we need to understand what normativity is.
Yes, thank you for the question again. In my tradition, the Old Catholic Church, in the struggle after the First Vatican Council, the 7 ecumenical councils were considered as a counterpart, a counter-narrative to the First Vatican Council. So that is very much which connects me also to the Reformation critique, I think. So, and the Old Catholics were always, or are always, very much saying we like a reformation, the reform of the church in the light, by returning to the ancient church in their principles. So I think this is very important in my tradition, and I think it is also very important because this is also going back to the common source of all churches of today. I think it's very important. And having said this, I think that, and then of course the Nicene Creed is a text which many churches still can share with each other, and I think that is something which is very, very important, especially in a situation where we are now, that we do not, everybody formulates his or her own texts and so on. And having said this, on the other side, I also think that it's also important to be realistic about what is the concept of the ancient church. I mean, we know from historical perspective that it was a violent phase, it was a conflicting phase, and we should not just forget about that. So it's on the one hand, I think it's important to live with ideals and to think about that, what also to keep on what we have. But on the other hand, also that does not mean that we are not allowed to criticize it. I think what we also heard today from the other papers, that persecution, violence, interpretations which are different but could not be tolerated, I think we are today very much more aware of this, much more than 30 years ago, when I was Jennifer and I this morning talked about what we have learned about Nicaea when we did study, and of course it was a very positive story. It was a story about Athanasius, and the other side was not told so much. So I think today, the legacy of Nicaea should not be idealized. It should be said that we can say where are our common sources. Where would we like as churches to go on this basis, but also where we have to criticize it commonly from a European view, like also from an Asian view, for example.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No. I said that there will be no translation of this. It would lose the continuity. I'm sorry for that. But Angela was reading my mind a bit. I thought about a second question would be about, because we heard a lot about idealization of the past, either of the democratic council, as Ramsey McMahon, as Ivana told about his critique of this procedures, how this assembly, this council really worked, that it was really not democratic and not well informed in all these aspects. On the other hand, we heard about the idealization of emperor and worldly power in Reformation. So there is a tendency to idealize the past. It's always, in my opinion, it's something that every age, every human civilization has and develops, because it helps it to find some patterns, find some sort of let's say friends in the past. So, but what can we do with it? How can we work with this idealization in other way than to completely reject it? So, what's your opinion? What's your experience with that? Maybe we can start again with the same round. Somebody wants to start.
I think theology is, on the one hand, of course, thinking and reflecting on theology and theological topics like the Trinity and the Trinitarian belief, and how we can appropriate this also in our situation as churches and in our own belief. For example, for me, in the Creed, the Holy Spirit is a very important part in that, and because I also think that pneumatology we sometimes forget in other parts of theology. This is one part. I think the part of the dogmatic reflection, but there is of course another part, and this is the historical critical part. and both belong together. I steal this from Döllinger, Ignaz von Döllinger, a Munich church historian in the 19th century, and he spoke in a very famous speech. He spoke about the two eyes of theology. One is the more speculative, the more dogmatic part, and the other is the historical critical part. And I think in good theology, which is the basis also for being church, I think these both belong together. So I think, and this will also keep us from too much an idealization of the thing, that if we look on developments in a historical critical way, then we cannot say that dogmatics wins the history. As I said, I must say this is also something which, as an old Catholic, we learned from the First Vatican Council, that there the dogmatics won the history, and then you could wipe away a pope who was heretically arguing and all things. But I think today theology has to be honest and to become also more honest, or to remain honest to historical developments, and not putting only history, because I think we have to live with both eyes, but to bring them also in a dialogue.
Thank you. I will defend the third eye, which would be the contemplative eye. Contemplative eye. When we spoke about the two eyes, I think I would feel blind with them. And the third eye, which would be the contemplative eye, I think enables a different kind of positivity. This would not be the positivity of the ideas, which I do not neglect. I mean, after all, I teach theology. But it would be the positivity of experience, for which the words are only translation. And I think this type of positivity, which is grounding and which is not promising light futures, because it doesn't have words for that, it's more concerned with the here and now, I think provides an alternative to the idealism which would be of the utopian orientation. With the idealism, however, I think that there is also its negative form, and that today in our age we are more in danger of the criticism getting so wild that it is close to losing its meaning. What do I mean? That if we look critically at the times of the council, we could see all the negative aspects, and we could forget that this is an example of ambivalence history, not a dogma about the negativity of the history. And that our concern with the negative, I think today, is overrated, and that the populist ideologies in the society and sometimes in the churches exploit that. So I think a little bit of idealism is all right, because it counterbalances what is too strong anyway. And to have an idealism about the possibility of common faith is for me even more all right. I liked when Angela said that one of the really good functions of the creed is that it unites us, especially when it is recited in liturgy and professed in liturgy. It unites us with broader community than is our own, in our confessions, countries, in our centuries. And this bond, I would see, is very positive. Of course, it unites us also with all the rubbish through the history. But it is not only that. And this type of positivity today, I think, is really very much needed. And the critical thinking, I know it's sort of, especially when the students come to the first year, like some of you, when people think to be critical means to be negative. But to be critical means to be able to think and to look at issues from different angles. And sometimes being critical means being positive in the setting where people are too negative. So the critical thinking, I think, necessarily includes also some element of rehabilitation. And I would like this side of critical thinking to be also more developed with regard to Christian tradition. Not to fall to the traps, which I think some of them at least we have tried to identify, but to go forward with the wealth and with the good food which is there.
Hard to add now something. Yeah, but when you asked the question, I was thinking how we can keep the democracy or the participation, and even we will speak about the synodality part in our churches to avoid this to positively seen historical parts, or to not go on the wrong way to some idolatry and so on. And my personal topic and interest is adult education, and I think that if we are lucky to live in the democratic state and to be part of the church and to have the role there, so I would encourage us to really be active part, not to just follow, but critically see, as Adila and Ivana mentioned, with these 3 eyes, and try to realize what's my part in it, and what I can, how I can be useful. And also we mentioned that in Czechoslovakia Church we had the period when we even I could say heroistically adore the first patriarch, and speaking about this topic, I might say that to realize that even in Nicea, even 200 years ago, we're still people with our different needs, and we're not made of stones. So to realize that the people still has been in some way the same, and it could maybe avoid some idealization too.
It's for me, maybe speaking as a historian, the most effective mean or even weapon against every kind of idealization is to do historical research work. And so I think it is very important to go back to the sources and to find out what really did happen then. Before and at the Council of Nicaea, and be also critical against, and they're totally in line with what Ivana just said, critical against maybe also too critical attitude towards the Council of Nicaea. I'd like to give you an example. There was a very important historian, you might know his name, Eduard Schwarz, a German. And he started in the beginning of the 20th century to edit documents around the Council of Nicaea. And his idea was that if everything is edited about this council, then it would be proven that this council was just a political event. And today we have, under the title of the works of Athanasius, about more than 7,000 documents edited. But if you read this edited, edition, those documents, and especially if you get into the research about the council, you will find out that especially historians today argue that it was not just a political event, but really an event of the church. So in a way, it turned against that what Eduard Schwarz intended, editing all those documents. So I think, as I said, it is kind of very good sort of weapon against idealization if you go to the sources and look closely what actually did happen then.
Thank you. I like this notion or this concept of being critical against too critical criticism, so to say. But we mentioned that already. It's the theme of synodality that will also be elaborated in the workshops. That is maybe one of the most important legacies of the, not just the first council, but of all the old councils of the church. And we are here from 4 different churches and church traditions. So maybe the next round, the next question would be, how is synodality in your church tradition now? What are the positive, what are the negative experiences? Because it's not just one-sided. And how is it with democracy in the church? I'm from Roman Catholic tradition, so we have our special problem with synodality in the church that is hierarchical, so to say, and we now see it in our church as the synodal process is slowly going on, but some people are enthusiastic about that, and some are very skeptical and say there will be nothing from that because in the bishop's office there will be all the documents of the sessions will be lost, and well, it's very ambiguous, but you are from other churches that work differently. So what's your experience with this special legacy? Please, Jennifer, can you start?
Yes, I might respond with giving 2 responses. The first is that you might expect that in our Lutheran tradition, synodal elements in the way that not only clerics but also lay people take part in the decisions of the council, that those elements were introduced fairly late, not earlier than in the 19th century. So you can find in the writing of the reformers a very high esteem of council decisions, but at the same time, lay people were not included in those processes. It was really up to down, from the top to the congregations. Very often decided in Wittenberg, and the congregations had to follow what was decided there. So not earlier than in the 19th century, we have synods in our church, and not only in Germany but worldwide. So it's fairly late development that we have synodal elements. So that would be one response. As a second is that right now we have a lot of complaints even within our churches, because we have synods and synods with lay participation, but they complain that they are very much challenged because they have to make decisions and they do not have the time, they do not have the knowledge, and very often synods are just places where financial issues are discussed and not questions of theology at all. So this is really a challenge for us to get synods more, yes, really as a place where people can reflect also on their confession or on confession within our times.
So I'm from Czechoslovak Church, the same as Ivana, so maybe we will have 3 churches here in panel presented. And so if I may start, Czechoslovak Church became as a reform from Roman Catholic Churches 1920, so the democratic and synodal participation in the first gathering, the official one, was presented, even though the reform started as a progressive wing of the Roman Catholic priests who wanted to start the reform inside the Roman Catholic Church. Maybe you know more. I don't know how to go to if I may go to the details. But what I want to point out is that this lay and clerisy aspect was presented. If you see in the archives, it's very nicely seen that the synod has its commissions, and there you can read the name of the delegate, then the job, and then the parish affiliation. And according to it, you can see how different social layers has been presented. So it wasn't in the beginning. The structure is still valid for this for this official church even now. But the development I see is what my colleague mentioned is that as we are smaller and smaller church, and we don't have so many active likes, and even the educated clerisy, and so it has some development. So nowadays we still have the commissions, but the commissions are more oriented on the participation, somehow linked to the local diocese context, not so much oriented on the on the specialization or So that's development I see, and maybe then we can speak about the solutions.
Thank you. Yes, we are from the same church with Veronica, but not the same generation, and there is a difference. I think I'm from the generation that has seen too much of the corrupted practices in the church, and I have one of the old-fashioned beliefs, which is, for example, the belief in expertise. And if you have the synodal processes without that, you are running for a disaster. If you have biased people who don't have tools to critically inspect their bias projection, as Freud quite rightfully said, to the heavenly sky, they would do really nasty things with bias argumentations. And I have seen too much of that. When it is spoken about the democratization of the church, and I imagine the demos that would take the power into their hands, I shiver a little bit. But I think you can have abuse of clerical power equally. So when we speak about the way forward, one of the old principles which on a good day was used for election of the bishop or nomination of the bishop later was hagios et doctus, holy and educated. And I think this principle of the striving towards, and again we are back to some form of idealism that could be at least a guiding principle, that if this would be both for clergy and for lay people, this very ideal that could be put to the service of the church communities, this, to my understanding, would move us both beyond clericalism, which we see unfortunately too much still around in different churches, not only in the Orthodox and the Roman Catholic, or the rule of the uneducated bias that don't have the tools even to critically scrutinize their own piety.
Yeah, thank you. I could follow up with that. I think I'm glad that you brought this question. First of all, I would say synodality is present in all churches. So therefore I think we need to clarify what each church means by synodality, because otherwise you can also idealize, you cannot just wipe out any differences because everybody is synodical minded, but the effect is important, I think. First thing. Second thing is that I would say that it's important to discern between democratic and synodical, because these are two different things. I said this before once at our synod. I had held a speech, and then I got immediate reaction. So you are arguing anti-democratic, and that was very funny, because I do not want to play this against each other. But I think we still have, all churches still have to learn this differentiation, what is democratic and what is synodality. And synodality, in my view, means indeed to be on the way and so on. We know this, of course, but also I think true synodality means also to find a consensus, a common, shared and unanimous view. So it's not unanimity in a certain way of that 51 to 49, but it's much more than that, to find a consensus. And I think that is something all churches struggle, because finding a consensus is very difficult. In Faith in Order, we started to use this method. There was a huge crisis in the 2000s about this principle of how can we vote as churches. And it's very interesting. In Faith in Order, we use blue cards and orange cards. So when we have a meeting of the commission, we say, do you feel warm to it, or do you have a problem with it still, or question with it? So if somebody raises a blue card, then it will be asked, what is the point you have? What do you want to say? So, and until there are no blue cards, we can't come to a resolution. And that, I think, is in principle a very good way to also let those speak who have some troubles in their stomach still about a question. Of course, that can also be used as a power argument. So everything can be abused, I think. But I think the idea that we have to come to a certain consensus, and sometimes finding consensus takes much, much, much more time than we are used to. And that is the problem with the time also. But I really think that somehow this could be helpful, because what we have now in synodical processes is that at a certain point there is a majority and there is a minority, and at a certain point the minority does not speak out anymore because they are afraid of it or whatever, and that is, I think, a problem which we somehow have to deal with. So that was my second remark. And my third remark is that the Old Catholic Church started with a synod in the 19th century. That was, of course, the model of also against, everything was somehow in reaction to this experience after the First Vatican Council. And so they created a synod after some discussion. One person who was a canon lawyer here in Prague was a very important person, Johann Friedrich von Schulte. He's still a well-known canon lawyer, criticized wrote a lot about councils and things. And so he was a very important person in creating this synod where the lay people had rights and responsibility. So it was not only a grace that lay people would be part of it, but they would be the same sort of members like the clergy and the bishop. I think that was the first thing, which is very good. But when I wrote my doctoral dissertation some decades ago, I also thought, where are the women? Where are the women? So in the 19th century, of course, there were no women at the synod. So the question of who should be included came up only later. I mean, as a problem it was seen, but of course because the old Catholics were so much, they wanted so much to be in tone with the state authorities and the civil position of women and men, that they said, okay, we are now including lay people, and we are very proud of it, having lay people. Johann Friedrich Schulte somewhere writes, we are even going further than all the Protestants with their ideas about synods. But they did not include women. So I think we also have to look, when we talk about synodality, which groups are maybe excluded, or which opinions or which thought tradition is maybe excluded in our way of putting things. And of course then you get also the problem which Ivana mentions, that you have sometimes strong lobby groups, fundamentalists who want to push things. So I think that is something we also have to somehow deal with, those strong lobbies, which can have a positive or a negative effect. But the emphasis, or the problem with the women, or the problem with the inclusion of women, seeing them also as fully lay people in the 19th century, that took us until the 1920s. So it's also something I think we have to consider. And then it was about 50 years later that the first woman came into the leadership body and so on. Also, so the whole question, who has the power, or who has the right to give leadership within the church, is also something in the synodical process. And I think that is also something which is at the moment, with all these discussions on synodality, comes up again, of course, very strongly.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I want to respond with one more thing, and this has to do with the fragility of the memory of the church. I think because the Hussite church, for example, and it's not the only one, the Hussite church doesn't have the monopoly on doing things badly sometimes. But in some of our councils, both ethical and doctrinal documents were accepted, both by lay people and by clergy in our system, that are heavily problematic. The doctrinal documents, for example, when the liberal wing had lobbied for moving out the faith in resurrection. And there would be some ambivalence in it, in some of the documents. Or there would be the moral documents, which would include loyalty to the communist regime. And I think because the councils did that, it really weakened belief in whether anything good can come out of them. And I think these fragile memories, I would say, that they cast long shadows. And it's important to be aware of that whatever we decided on even on the small level of the communities, if things are done really badly, that it would weaken the faith in that group or in that process a long time afterwards. And I think coming back from that, the questions then still emerge at some point. So what is it that works? And why is it, when you become too proud of your own systems or achievements, you are probably at the point of losing some safer and longer strands. And I think that this is also part of the whole synodality debate. I think an important part, which prevents it from being too excited about its own tasks and achievements.
Yes, I also like to add, because we have a discussion about that going on, concerning the memory and the history of synods in our church. As you probably all know, we had churches during the 30s in Germany who very much affirmed the NS ideology, the German Christians, and it happened to be that the majority of the synods affirmed this ideology. So there have been synods on the one hand, and on the other hand we have the Synod of Barmen and Wuppertal. So synods were strongly against this ideology. So in the end, you cannot say that synods are the solution for all the problems, because you have synods as a model for not to copy today, and at the same time you have a synod like the Synod of Barmen, which is of course a kind of model for synods. But as I said, so synodality as such is not cannot be a solution for all the problems.
So, friends, we are almost out of time. So, short of time, sorry. So, but I think I would give a chance for the first of you, some of you, to have the privilege to ask a question, because we should really stop at several minutes to have time for lunch and following programs. So please, if not, or no, well, I have a question that I yeah, of course, but nobody raised their hand, but you have a chance, really. No. So let me ask the final question. We were talking about past, about present, and now maybe I would point a little bit to the future. So imagine the next ecumenical council of the church that would really be ecumenical, that would include all the churches and denominations, not just one church with some guests, but really ecumenical assembly, lay people with theologians, with lay persons, with ordained and lay people. So, and you would be, I would say, fathers of the council, but well, you would be members of the council. So what would you push, what would you like to be on the agenda in the first place of such an ecumenical council?
Yes, I start maybe, because we were discussing these questions in the frame of the International Lutheran Orthodox Dialogue. We have now the topic of synodality, and there are a lot of overlapping questions and themes and so on, and there's one really burning issue, and this affects the role of the Pope. Because I think even Lutherans and Orthodox can find easily an understanding of procedures and participation, even concerning lay people, but what will be then the role of the Pope? So that would be my first point on the agenda.
While you're asking, I've been thinking about the structure, and maybe it would be good and nice if people who really attend the ecumenical council would like to be there. So, yeah, really, they see the importance, and not just that they are delegates, that they must be there, or they are already too negative about anything like this. And so to have the intercession maybe, and also the openness to be part of this such a gathering. Yes, and then linked with the openness to really give space and take space. Yes, and about the topics, I was thinking just shortly that maybe it could be how we can better, or practically how we can do things together, from prayers to the active help in the society. So concrete, active action.
Thank you. I think if there would be a synod or council where all the churches and all representatives were present, I would not need to ask any more questions. But I think that for me this would be an idealization, and I think it would never happen in the history. To give you a little bit of the skepticism. But I think I will give you maybe a different answer. Where do I see hopeful signs in the future? And the answer will do with something which is quite ambivalent, and this is the Pan-Orthodox Council. It's ambivalent the way it was conducted, who was presented there. The documents from the council were quite disappointing to many, including many of my Orthodox friends. But after the council, initiative called IOTA was started, which gathered young Orthodox theologians throughout the world, which is not exclusively Orthodox, and then they invite also others who are interested in the theme. And it is not the only initiative. There is a series of conferences, meetings. They try to recover the openness which was there in 1920s and 1930s. And it's not just one couple of people, not even couple of institutions, but I think I can call it a movement that is open and which was initiated by a council of which we could say, well, there was nothing much really. And to me, this is a sign of real hope, that things like that are possible. They are not perfect, of course not, but they are possible. And this would be an example for me of the Holy Spirit working in the ambivalence of our decisions, of our power structures, but still allowing not only abstract hope, but a concrete path towards something new.
I would say the most burning question next to the Pope. I mean, this is the question of the structure, how we find consensus, how we really become more one church again, in a sense that we are really sharing, going back to our common ground. And I think the most burning question at the moment for me would be how do we save the planet? I think that is in some way the most important question for the future, for the survival. But also, I think this, of course, it's a question which we somehow have to first think about how we can address it. That indeed these different perspectives, power plays, and so on, somehow be addressed too, and the interests of the people. So this talking about what the story of Genesis, of the Bible, means that God has given the creation to the people, and what the responsibility would be. I think that would be very, very important.
Thank you.
Also for our children and the future.
So, thank you very much. I think these last words of Angela about the question of how to save the planet, how to save creation, what can we do with this, are, in my opinion, good ending of it, as it turns our perspective from, let's say, internal struggles and internal structural problems of our churches to the really wide world and to its problems, because we are sent to be for the world, not entirely from the world, but for the world. So I think I thank you for this. I think it was a very rich and interesting discussion, and I look forward to the workshops that will elaborate on some of the, or most of the things that we